What if your hobby wasn't something that you had to leap toward to try to do? What if it was something that you had all along all your life, but you never actually thought of making a career of it? Welcome to the Cheeseburger Lens. On our last episode, we talked to Amanda and we made a bold pivot, like going from your career, taking a hobby, and then going and doing another profession. Today, though, we are going to look at something that's been around your entire life, and then how do you transfer that into a profession? My guest today is Christie Wall. She is a photographer who took her love for capturing moments and then turning it into a profession. Christie, welcome to the Cheeseburger Lens. Great to have you.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here.
So before we start, though, there is something kind of unique and cool about you. Christie, can you tell the folks what vehicle you just got a little while ago?
I just got a Jeep Wrangler.
Yeah.
It's a 4-door convertible, and it's a stick shift.
It's the coolest thing because it's a stick shift, everybody. So, and it's so much fun to see her do it, driving around, and then you're with the top off and everything. I think it's a blast. So just a little something unique about you. I really love that fact that you guys do that, and she gets to enjoy that with her husband and her family and her kids.
Absolutely. My daughter is 15 and she's just learning how to drive. So obviously she's going to learn how to drive stick too. So we're a stick shift family. We love stick shifts.
You don't see that much anymore. So
yeah, but it's a lot of fun.
So
if you haven't tried it, I don't know. You might want to.
Right. So welcome to the Cheeseburger Lens. On this show, we are talking about how people can take their hobby and trying to make it into a career or profession. You have a little of a unique story that is different from most people that go from hobbies to professions. You've had your hobby, it seems, since you were probably born, and you're a second-generation photographer. Can you tell everybody your story and how your dad fit into the whole story of photography for you?
Absolutely. One of my first memories is growing up in my father's studio where I was modeling and kind of just sitting there while he adjusted the lighting. And, he would do these test shots, and then I would step out, and then the model would step in, and then I would watch the whole process unfold. So that was a lot of fun doing that. And then eventually it involved for me to assist him. And so instead of, being in front of the camera, now I got to learn all the behind the scenes stuff, how to ring up the backdrops and where to place the lighting and all that kind of fun stuff. So, so being a photographer's kid, it really gave me a lot of education. I was able to help him in the darkroom. Way back then, there was nothing digital about photography. It was all manual and film. And I was able to watch him in the darkroom. I learned about all the chemicals, and, he would hang things, and he had an enlarger there. And really funny, interesting thing is that he taught me how to adjust my f-stop by using the eye of a cat.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And he also, before digital retouching for negatives, he would edit with a ballpoint pen.
Wow.
So he would take out acne with a ballpoint pen. It's fascinating.
Wow.
Fascinating technique that he was using. Obviously, none of that we do nowadays, but if I had to do it, I could.
Wow.
So that's kind of a unique skill that I'll probably never learn, but it definitely taught me a lot about photography, a lot about being very, very careful, very skilled, very detailed. And he was a wonderful, wonderful mentor.
Awesome. Now, how about the name The Stash and the Army Major? What's behind all that? And the artsy-fartsy photographer.
Yes.
What are the stories behind those names?
So Dad was an Army Major. He did 2 tours in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
He was a helicopter pilot, and a damn fine one. He was also the base artist. And they called him the artsy-fartsy artist. And he would paint and calligraphy different call signs for people and put it
Wow.
on their helicopter before they flew out. And so they kind of had like a personalized chopper in the war. And so his call sign was Stash.
Wow.
Because he grew a mustache. And in the Army back then, you weren't allowed to have a mustache.
Oh, really? Okay.
But for some reason, my dad was so charming that he was able to get away with it.
Wow. So that's a big deal because call signs became popular with the movie like Top Gun, I guess, is where most people understood what
Right.
call signs were. So that's a big deal, right?
Yeah, it is
To
a
be able
big
to do
deal.
that.
And he kept the name Stash his whole life. And that became his trademark on his photography signs and, signage for his studio. It was always a Stash.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. He's a cool guy.
I bet. Now, your dad also had the privilege, I guess, to photograph a vice president. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So when he returned from the Army, he, of course, was, sent different places throughout the world. But he eventually landed in Fort Rucker, Alabama. And at that time, he became a helicopter pilot instructor.
Oh, wow.
And so while he was instructing, he lived off base and continued his photography. And so during the military balls and during the flight school picture where the whole class is in front of a big chopper, he would come in and he would be the military photographer. And then off base, he would photograph the pilots with their families and, all kinds of stuff that he did with the military. And so since he was the military photographer, when the vice president came through Fort Rucker one day, he was commissioned to photograph that event. And so the vice president was there, and Dad was not allowed to have any assistants with him. He had to have a background check, all that fun stuff, right?
Wow.
And so the assistants usually made sure that everything was perfect, right? There's no hair in the eyes, the glasses are up. And so it was just Dad. And so he was there with his tripod ready to take the photo. Mm-hmm. And he noticed that the vice president's tie was just a little bit crooked.
Uh-oh.
And so he was like, oh no, I can't photograph the vice president like this. It has to be perfect because Dad was all about the details. So he walked up to the vice president with his hands coming towards his neck. Oh, no. And the Secret Service was on it. Tackled my dad, had his feet, had his hands. They were like, sir, you cannot touch the vice president.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, it's his tie. It's his tie. And so, so he was sweating bullets at that point. So the Secret Service came and adjusted his tie for him. Dad took the shot, they left, and then he about peed his pants.
And how did the shot come out?
That shot came out great.
Of course it did.
He was all pro.
Now, for those of you that are out there that aren't aware, if you haven't taken too many photographs or done many shoots, the photographers normally will have an assistant, or they'll ask the model or their subject if they can touch them or if they can do something. Yes. And so that's the funny part that he was going toward. I'm sure he was going to say something, but the Secret Service just thought something else.
Right there. They thought, yep, they were taking no chances.
That was really awesome.
But
that is a great
from
story.
now on, when I photograph, I always remember that. Always ask the person first. Tell them what you're doing, why you're approaching them.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So how did you and I meet? I'm new to photography. I've been a golf pro for years and years. And then I transferred over here to photography, and it's been a lot of fun. I went to my very first workshop, coincidentally here in Orlando, and I met you there, and you were my very first mentor. I said, hey, can I just hang out with you? I heard your story, and I heard you talking in there during the workshop, and I'm like, hey, can I just hang out and assist you or do whatever? I just wanted to just get into somewhere, and it was really cool. So that's how we met, everyone, that she was really gracious enough to let me into her world, and I got to meet your family and your husband and your kids, and it's a family event with what you do when we do shoots and stuff. So back in the the day, you had a thing with Disney here,
I did.
which a lot of people I'm sure would love to hear about stories about working at Disney. Can you tell everyone about your story with Disney and what you got to do over there, and how did that help you with your photography later on in the future?
Of course. Well, in addition to being a photographer's kid, I also grew up in the theater. So I learned at a very early age about sets and props and costume and makeup, and then of course, the acting. But I learned from a very early age that there is so much more than just the actor on the stage. There takes a whole crew behind you to be able to put on this production. And so I kind of associated that with what my dad does too, because he has a crew behind him helping him take the shot. So with that, I went into the performing arts in high school and graduated from a performing arts high school in theater.
Oh, wow.
And then went on to a graphic design position with a newspaper back then, and started learning Photoshop and InDesign and all kinds of fun programs that I hadn't learned before. And then I got a job at Disney.
Wow.
And after my graphic design position, I moved on to Disney. And I was lucky enough to be able to audition and become part of their performance teams.
That's
there.
awesome.
So I was able to really get a firsthand look at professional acting and dancing and productions. And I took all of that knowledge with me, and I went to school for theater arts. And so when I was finished with theater arts, I was very skilled in the photography process,
Wow.
graphic design, and professional theater. And so those three things really helped me when I was able to think about, maybe becoming a professional photographer one day.
Wow, that is so cool. So backgrounds matter.
Yes.
And then I'm sure everyone out there has hobbies that it's just a hobby. People love to do things. I've had the fortune of writing 2 poetry books, and I got published. But I never thought of it as a career. I just loved the hobby part of it, and I just enjoyed being creative and being on the side, and I never took it seriously. But you, with a camera in your hand since you were born practically, what finally, Christie, made you think like, you know what, maybe I could do this professionally? I have all this extension and background, and to your point, you're doing with the Disney thing and the theaters and all this other stuff. But at what point did it turn into, hey, I can make this a career?
Well, it was actually my dad. He was really kind of pushing me towards that, to kind of take over the family business when he was diagnosed with cancer. And he was thinking about, the next step for his legacy and our family. And I really loved the attention to detail that my dad instilled in me, as well as the attention to people that I learned at Disney. Disney is very people focused. They try to create the best magical experience for each and every guest. And so when Dad was encouraging me to kind of think about this, I thought, well, hey, I have these skills. Maybe this might work. And so Dad started teaching me all of the ins and outs about the studio process. And he learned on film, but he was still a photographer when the camera age turned into digital. Wow. And so he learned both skills. And I had also had a pretty firm grasp on manual. But then he opened my eyes to the whole digital world, and the photography just kind of blossomed from there. I became a mother, and so I got a camera, and I was just kind of a hobby, playing around, taking photos of my girls. And then, he came to me with a proposal that, if he wanted to hand over the torch to me, if I could take it. And I thought, I think actually this is a good fit for me.
You mentioned your dad into terminal cancer, and I think most people out there have something in their life that happens that makes them flip the switch to say, oh, I better do something. Life is short.
Yes.
And for me, it was my open heart operation I had a couple years ago. And I still keep this, I talk about this on every podcast, but I still keep this as a memory of my time in the hospital and how great it was. And luckily, I'm still here, right? And so that was the catalyst for me to say that, and my mom passed away also a couple years ago, for me to say, let's go. There's no more wasting time, no more goofing off. I'm not going to wait for the perfect time and the perfect moment, or when I have enough money, or when I think I can have enough vacation days from my job to actually see something or do something. The switch flipped. Do you remember the day when the switch flipped for you and you said, oh, this is great, taking pictures of my daughters, but maybe I could take pictures of other people?
Yes, I did. It was... when my father passed away, he gave me his studio. So I inherited his studio. I inherited the lights, the tripods, the backdrops that he had hand painted, vintage stuff. So cool. I had so many memories tied to all of this throughout my childhood that I felt very well equipped and well prepared to start doing the things that I saw him doing. And now my children get to help me. So it's really cool because it's come full circle. And they are, growing up as a photographer's kid, just like I did. So I would say his inheritance for me really, really made me want to honor his legacy and make him proud. And, just that attention to detail, like I said, always, that my dad instilled in everything that he did. And just making people happy and capturing those special expressions that you normally can't take with your cell phone, really connecting with people and, giving them a lasting memory that they could hand down to their grandchildren and their grandchildren and, through generations.
Now, I've been on a few shoots with you, and it's amazing to watch somebody who really knows their stuff, like in any profession or anything that you do. You really take control. You're almost like a director out there, and your family's helping, and all these other people are there helping, and I was helping, and it's like, just do this, and then you, to your point, you were very detailed. How did that work? And by the way, you work with high school seniors mostly. Your shoots are mostly high school seniors. And families. So that is something in terms of connecting with the people you want to connect. But you will provide some food, you'll provide some snacks, some hors d'oeuvres or whatever it is during the shoot. And I just thought that was really family oriented. Yeah. And when I see your clients there, they feel very, very at ease. And they're not like, oh, I'm scared of the camera, none of that stuff.
Yes.
One interesting thing about your business is word of mouth. You didn't have to market much or advertise much. That happened to me with the golf business. 90% of my students were word of mouth. Yes. And so how did that come to be with from your first shoots, or how did that come to be that word of mouth was your main marketing technique?
Sure. It's very helpful if you volunteer through your community.
Okay.
Church groups, PTAs, community work. You meet people in the community and they ask you what you do. You say you're a photographer, and they say, oh, tell me more about that. We're looking for a photographer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, something I have to say is there is a photographer for everyone out there. So my way that I do things is particular and special to me and my background, and what I do wouldn't necessarily jive with what someone else would be more comfortable doing. So as a photographer, you have that wonderful space to be able to be yourself and take what you know and your creative abilities, and to be able to, extend that to the creative process and help your guests feel nice and comfortable and, ready to be photographed.
That's a really key point. So most people, when they think of networking, they're like, oh my God, I don't want to go out there and meet a million people.
Right.
But the way you just mentioned, it isn't networking per se. You're out there volunteering. You're helping in your church groups. You're probably at places that you already are hanging around with a bunch of people besides work, something outside of work maybe. And so for you out there that are looking to see, well, how do people do it by word of mouth? It's things that Christie just mentioned. Volunteer, go help maybe at a food pantry or something.
That's
go
right.
help at a church. Go help at your local park districts or anything like that. Anywhere where people might need help, and you don't know who you're going to meet.
That's
and
right.
to your point, then they start talking and finding out things about you.
My daughter had an ensemble. She plays violin, and the ensemble came over to our house during spring break, and they were playing their instruments. So it's violin, viola, cello, and bass. And I actually had a set already set up for a shoot that I was doing later that week. And so I sat them down in that space and I just started popping pictures. Of course, I asked their parents beforehand, of course. But started popping pictures and gave them to the parents for free. And they were so enamored with everything. I mean, there was like a full set and everything, and
Wow.
they kind of understood what I did, what the quality of the work was, that they came back. And they said, hey, I'd love for you to photograph my daughter for her graduation.
Wow.
Or I'd love for you to photograph our family because I see your quality of work. So even just making like the first one free will help you network. Because then they post that online, and then people are like, oh my gosh, who's your photographer, And so then they say, hey, it's Christie Wall, here's her phone number. And so even though I've only been word of mouth, I have a wait list.
Yeah, which is awesome.
And it is wonderful. It works very well for me. Very well for me.
Exactly.
Thankfully.
Now, one of the things, you've had a camera in your hand again since you were born. How do you keep up with the training and the new techniques and the new development?
Yes.
For example, one of the things when I bought my really good camera. This is my first camera ever, the old Sony. But then I got myself an updated Sony, and I try to read this manual. It's a ton of pages here, but this actually keeps me updated and find out, oh my God, I didn't know this camera could do this, and you're finding out stuff. So that's one of the things I use for keeping up to date on stuff and training. What are some of the things you do if you've been a lifelong camera photographer in that industry, that type of world? How do you keep up with the different things that are out there in terms of photography?
Things are always changing. Like I said, I first learned with film, and then we went to digital, and then we started learning Photoshop. So it is, you always have to keep up with the new technology. Technology is changing so fast in today's age that I have found it very helpful to network via Florida Professional Photographers. That's where we met.
Yes, we are both members of that.
Yes.
Go FPP
Yes,
there.
go FPP. And so I take the classes there and the workshops, and I do a lot of observation. So if there's a photographer out there that I think is doing some pretty cool work, I will bring up their photo and I'll study it. And I will note the lighting, and I'll note the shadows, and I'll note the costuming, and I'll note the expression, and I'll note, the camera angle. And so I'll study it. And then from that, my creative juices get going. And then I don't try to replicate that, but I try and incorporate some of those things that I saw that I admired into my own art. And so I'd say, a little bit of everything.
Okay, very cool. Now, one of the things that people fear out there from going from a hobby to a profession is all the legal stuff. Legal this, legal that, and how do I form a business, and am I supposed to be an LLC? Am I supposed to be a sole proprietor? Am I supposed to be a corporation? What am I supposed to be?
Yes.
What are some of the things that you've dealt with, subscriptions and waivers and all this other stuff for the photography business? Every business is going to have their legal side of things needed to be done. How did you go from being a hobby, watching your father do it and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden your name's on the business, your name is the legal entity and everything? How did you go through that, and how did you wade through all those waters?
Well, I'm still waiting. I mean, that is a hard road to go down. There's no simple answer. the best thing to do is to hire a business lawyer, an advisor, and just bring all of your things to them and say help. My father had one, and so I learned a lot from that route. But I know not everyone is a second generation photographer, so my advice to them would be to go that route of a business legal advisor.
Gotcha.
Yeah. There are permits, there are licenses, there's taxes that you need to pay. There are, like you said, so many subscriptions to so many things. It can get very overwhelming. So when you're trying to run your own business, number one, it's very helpful to have a mentor. And like I had my father. You can easily find a mentor through places like Florida Professional Photography or Professional Photographers of America. And then, just make sure that you're on top of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned permits. Can you give us a story of a time that you had to get a permit and why you had to get a permit and what kind of shoot it was?
Yes.
Could you give us a story? Yeah.
Yes, I had a shoot at a national park. And parks are very particular about the kind of equipment that you're allowed to bring in. And so there was this official document that I had to sign, and I had to send it to the county. County had to approve it, and then I had to come back with a copy of that approval to give to the park administration, and then they were able to let me in. And then, that took a process. So, people who come to me that are like, hey, our family wants to do a photo shoot tomorrow. Can we do it at the park? And you're like, well, there's a lot to that behind the scenes that maybe a lot of people don't know. And it's a lot of work. But yeah, you got to be real careful because you don't want to ever be caught in a situation where you are photographing a client and someone comes up and says, you're not supposed to be here. You need to pack up and leave. Okay? That would be highly embarrassing. I am always terrified of that. So I always make sure I have my T's crossed and my I's dotted and make sure that, all the paperwork is filled out.
Right. So some of those public places out there, everybody just call ahead.
That's right.
And find out what we got going on.
That's right.
So what's been the biggest difference? Again, you've had the benefit of a lot of years as a hobby and a lot of time with the professional side of things. What's been the biggest difference, Christie, shooting as a hobby versus shooting as a professional?
Oh my goodness. It's time. Always time. So when I'm shooting as a hobby, I'm usually shooting my family or their friends. It's very loosey-goosey. I just have my camera. If I see a moment, I take the photo. I don't worry about the lighting. I don't worry about much. I'm just there to, capture the moment. When I'm a professional, I'm creating moments. Okay. So that takes a lot of planning in advance. So a lot of time goes into that. A lot of work goes into that. Timing with the sun, the setting of the sun. Timing with, when people can get there and when they can't. And, if that conflicts with golden hour or whatever, then we need to move this and we need to bring in a light. And so it's always constantly planning, and that takes a lot of time to do. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They think, when they hire a photographer, it's just a person that shows up with the camera, click, click, and we're done. Right. That is definitely not the case with professional photography. And so that education for people also is a little bit of a learning curve for your clients so that they understand that there's a lot more work involved in this and that's what they're paying for.
Yeah, one of the things I learned pretty fast with you in regards to being prepared for something like this was scouting locations.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about scouting locations and what's all involved in that?
Yes, I love scouting locations. When I'm in the studio, I like to create sets for people. And when I'm on location, I love to find those perfect spots that will give me the best results. And so I usually bring a test model with me. a couple days before. Me. Yes, you have been my test model many times. And I just see, in which position would be best to shape them. Because when I go on location with a model, I don't want to be like, okay, turn here. No, wait, that's not good. No, let's turn here. I need to know where their mark is. And so oftentimes I'll bring Easter eggs with me, those little plastic Easter eggs. And oftentimes the day before or a few hours before, I'll set the Easter egg down. And so in every place that we go, I say, stand right there by the Easter egg. The assistant picks up the egg, and I know exactly where they are positioned, where it's beautiful, the lighting is just right, the background is perfect. So there's a lot of planning involved, and I appreciate models like you who come out to assist me.
Those are fun. Scouting locations is fun.
Yeah.
So in regards to what you do and the photography and all the clients that you've had, what is the most rewarding part of what you do?
My most rewarding, especially for seniors, I would say for family photography as well, but especially for seniors, is just seeing the look on the parents' faces when they see this full display of their son or their daughter, their baby, who is now grown, achieving such a huge milestone in their life. That is worth every penny to me. Every moment of time that I spend, all the energy, everything, it's worth it to me to just see the look on their faces, and then to know that they're going to have these photos of their milestones to share, like I said before, with their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. I say quite often when I'm doing a formal portrait that your grandchildren might look at this and compare themselves to you and say, oh my gosh, I have my grandmother's eyes.
Wow.
Right?
Wow, yeah.
So just thinking about the long term for these photographs, it just really fills me with a deep sense of pride. And I'm just so happy to bless these families with these memories.
That is fantastic. I've always said that I enjoy being a golf instructor or teacher because when the person actually hits the ball the right way, the flush, and you get that certain sound that sounds really cool, like they do on TV, the people turn around and say, can I do that again? And I'm like, well, yeah, if you practice, let's do it again. I find the same reward in photography when you present somebody, as to your point, you present somebody with a photograph and they look at it like, oh, wow, whatever emotions that come up from that photograph. I've seen some of your pictures, and it's just, they're amazing, everyone. They're amazing, and you can see some of that emotion. I still remember the one that I got really emotional about because it was such a captured moment. I was there behind the scenes, and I remember you setting up for this picture with one of the high school seniors, and it just came out awesome. And to this day, I still think about that and how good it was.
That was so sweet. It is also so rewarding when people such as yourself, they get teary-eyed over the photographs that I take. This happened to me the other day as well. I was showing someone, and they just started crying, and I'm like, are you okay? And they say, no, I'm just touched by your art. That is very, very rewarding.
Fantastic. So you inherited, like you mentioned, your father's photography. At what point, because for the people that are out there, I'm sure there's a lot of kids or children that get things inherited to them. At what point did you feel like, oh, I'm doing this for my dad, I'm doing this because of my dad, I'm doing this for the family, to, hey, I'm doing this now for me and my family? And how did that transition go for you? And when did you notice that or feel that?
I know exactly when that was.
Okay.
That was a Mother's Day photo shoot that I did with my girls. It was a self-portrait.
Oh, wow.
And I come from a theatrical background, so this might sound weird to other people, but this is what my family and I did. We did a Tremaine family photo shoot. So the Tremaine family is the family of Cinderella, the evil stepsisters, and the evil stepmother.
Okay.
So I did these formal portraits of us in cosplay, where I was Lady Tremaine, and then I had Anastasia and Drizella next to me, and they were dressed as such. and they were sticking their tongues out at each other, and they had, their shoes were falling off, and, of course, all of that was planned. But I just remember how fun that was to do that with my family, that I realized how fun that must have been for my dad,
Wow.
when he was photographing his family. And so then I was like, I think I can do this now for me and my family. And I updated the equipment because my dad had these old, 1960 Honeywell lights. And so I updated those, and every step of the way, I just started updating. I still use his vintage backdrops. And of course I still use the knowledge, that I gleaned from my dad that is priceless. But when I look around now, I see me. I see my things, and I see that I am doing this, and my family is behind me now. And so I think that's the moment when it switched.
That is a great story. Fantastic. And hopefully there are others out there that will identify with the similar type of situation. So for someone who's been out there and been doing a hobby like yourself for the longest time, what piece of advice would you give them if they were considering going from a hobby to a profession?
That is a very good question. I think that if you put your own creative twist on things, okay, you are out not only to make a dollar, but you're out to bless people with these photos. If you understand the meaning behind what these photos and portraits will mean to the people that are behind, right? The mom and dads that are supporting the graduate, and the children, and the brothers and the sisters, right? They they purchase portraits for the siblings to put in their room when the graduate goes off to college, So I think more so than thinking of it as a business, is thinking of it as blessing the family with your talents the best that you can. And I think from there, the sales will come.
I completely agree with you. So when I got into the golf instruction business, I didn't say, I got to make $1 million. Everyone wants to make $1 million. We understand that, right? But some people want to make 5 million, 10 million. Great. Nice goals. But I truly found that if you were really good at your craft, if you did the training and you did the learning and you stayed updated, as you mentioned earlier, that if you're good, the money will follow.
That's right.
And I think that's your point. Even as a hobby, you can turn something that you really enjoy, as long as you're not thinking of, I got to make $1 million, I got to make $1 million. I don't think that's the point. For most people, hopefully it's just what they feel inside their heart. And so I completely agree with you. Follow your heart, right? And hopefully things will come up.
100%. And I'm also confident because my dad made a living out of photography, right? He was a helicopter pilot, yes. He was an instructor, yes. But when he retired, he continued his photography business, and he supported our family. And so I know it can be done. And I know that if, just like you said, take the pressure off of all the money and think about the client, and the money will follow.
Correct. How has your personal definition of success changed now that it's gone from a hobby to a profession? What would you consider being successful?
As I said before, just the look on the family's faces, that is success to me. When they purchase a large canvas to put and display in their home, and people come over and they say, wow, who took that? That is success to me. And that's that word of mouth that we're talking about, right?
Yep.
And, it all just kind of falls into place. And success to me just means that you're blessing people with your creativity. And it's just very rewarding.
I agree with you that the best form of advertising is word of mouth. And so when you do something really good, people are going to notice and people are going to follow. Christie, thank you so much for being here on the Cheeseburger Lens. Again, we were talking about taking a hobby and what does it take to become a profession or a career for other people. Your story is fantastic. Hopefully, people out there relate to it. And I just can't thank you enough for, first of all, being my mentor, being a friend, and now being here on the Cheeseburger Lens show. We really appreciate your time. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, George. Anytime.
So for those of you that are out there and you are thinking of going from a hobby to a profession, there's a lot of different ways to get there, right? Whether you've had a hobby for only maybe a couple days or maybe a couple years or your whole lifetime, like our guest today, there is a way to go from hobby to profession. And we're glad that you joined us. We will see you next time.